slides, so hopefully everything's going okay. Welcome, everyone. I appreciate your time and consideration this morning. Let me just advance my slide here. So as Paul mentioned, I'm Terry Sullivan. I really appreciate you joining me this morning.
Hey, Terry.
Yep.
I cannot see your presentation.
Oh, really? Well, that's interesting. Okay, bear with me here, Paul.
Can you see the share screen button at the bottom?
Yep, hold on one second. Let me, sorry about this, everybody.
There you go. I can see
Okay, so
it.
let me get to presenter view. Give me 1 second here. So sorry for the delay, everybody. How about now?
That's perfect.
Okay. So other than being a tech genius, as you guys can see, I think I'm a pretty big deal, and I'm sure you will too. Just kidding. This is the icebreaker photo that I use with my students. They usually get a chuckle out of it, so I hope that you do too. As Paul mentioned, I'm actually in my quote unquote 34th year of what I like to consider gaining more business experience. I actually returned to corporate America this year. I'm a VP of marketing at Allegro Senior Living, a leader in the luxury senior living space. But as Paul mentioned, have done a lot of entrepreneurial things, consultant, business coach, staff marketer. But you know, my first love, I would say certainly is teaching, which goes right up there with consulting and doing marketing. So I'm really happy to be here and appreciate, you know, everybody attending this session. You know, it's funny how the mouse decides not to advance, although when we went through the walkthrough yesterday, it worked fine. So Stu Kent, author for marketing management. Paul already told you about that, so I'm going to skip that. What I would love to know is if you could just use your chat function and tell me what courses do you teach and what year are the majority of your students? And Paul, I will rely on you to read some of those responses if you don't mind, and then we'll hop right into it.
We'll do it.
So again, what courses do you teach and what year are the majority of your students?
Okay, it looks like we have advertising, social media marketing, sports marketing, forecasting and analytics for juniors and seniors,
Right.
Advertising and social media marketing. Wow, they're coming through fast. Marketing and project management, digital marketing, consumer behavior, marketing, market research, business comms, services marketing, and event marketing.
Excellent.
And
Excellent.
it looks like a lot of them are saying juniors, sophomores, advertising, IMC campaigns for junior and seniors, PR, media innovations, media design.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, that's great. That's great. And that helps me kind of gauge, you know, what kind of audience we have, and particularly as it relates to project management. You know, why I kind of chose to do this topic, project management and relationship management, is a lot of times those things aren't necessarily covered, but they're sort of the unspoken heroes, if you will, of marketing. So as we know, marketing management typically focuses on strategy and execution. And as it relates to strategy and execution, we focus on the brand, the 4 Ps, the customer, communications, and technology, you know, among many others. But when we break it down, marketing is really complicated. Many layers, many players, many moving parts, many pieces. And it's funny because the more I go along and the more to which I am exposed, the more complicated it gets. When I started marketing, email was becoming a thing. I remember making interactive presentations and sending them as direct mail pieces on floppy disks. Hopefully all of you have seen a floppy disk like you're seeing here. I remember when the internet became a thing, and building websites and making sure they responded in Netscape Navigator and in Internet Explorer. I remember sort of scoffing at text messaging in the early 2000s, much like I did in 89 or 90 when I was first exposed to email. I remember when smartphones became mainstream, the social media boom, broadband internet, wireless Wi-Fi, and the list certainly goes on. And so if we think about the number of platforms, technologies, and channels in which our students market today, there are so many moving parts and different pieces. And whether a company is fully staffed or it's a lean marketing department, the ability to execute is critical to a successful strategy. When I teach intro to marketing, and by the way, that isn't me, I ask the class what their definition of marketing is in one or a few words. And invariably, I get a lot of different responses like advertising, selling, promotions, getting customers, building a brand, growing a business, etc. And after I write down all their answers on the board, I look at them and I say, you're right. And everyone just kind of looks at me and, they're looking around at each other, and I just follow up with, marketing is all of these things and so much more. But because marketing is so multi-dimensional and touches so many things in and outside the company with so many objectives, strategies, and tactics to support the goals, it's more complicated and more technical than ever to do marketing. Which brings me to the topic at hand for today's presentation: why your students need to learn about project and relationship management. So before we dig into the project management piece, somebody mentioned, covering project management in their last response, but if you could just let me know, do you cover project management at all in your courses? And just use your chat function. Simple yes or no, or if you want to elaborate a little bit, that's fine. Paul will read us some of the answers.
Looks like it's a resounding no. There's
okay.
One yes. There's two yeses and there's a some.
Yep.
So
perfect. I was hoping that it would be a resounding no, but okay. Okay, that's helpful. That's really helpful. So I'm utterly convinced that project management is the most undervalued skill in marketing. And part of project management, but yet separately related to it, is relationship management, which we will cover in a few minutes. But let's look at all the things we just talked about, the answers to what is marketing. If we break down some common objectives like getting customers or promotions into the tactics that support the strategy and objectives, it's clear to see why we need to be helping our students understand the importance of project management and relationship management before they actually get out into their jobs. We have students create a lot of marketing plans, right? But most of us probably do not do any kind of project management plans. And why? Because it's really likely that they will be doing project management before they ever create a marketing plan on the job. Project management usually starts at the coordinator level to some degree, but certainly becomes more pronounced in marketing manager and senior marketing manager roles. Some companies have dedicated project managers, but in many cases, a lot of this falls on the marketing manager who has all kinds of projects and responsibilities. So in essence, a marketing manager manages various things, right? Projects, time, people, communications, budgets, and a little thing I like to refer to as ambiguity, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So I'd like to show you what our marketing managers experience at Allegro Senior Living and all that's involved from a marketing manager's perspective and how important project management is to basically everything. So the marketing manager is literally in the middle of everything, right? With respect to what's being executed. She works hand in hand with, in our case, a digital agency, a traditional media buying agency, and the brand communications agency. So within each of these agencies are their own brand managers, account managers, and project managers with whom the marketing manager interfaces on a daily basis. The agency relationships in this case are pertinent to managing the workflow and end result or end deliverables. So in cases where the agency bandwidth is limited, let's say for special projects, we may work with individual freelancers as well. It might be web designers, developers, copywriters, or what have you. But additionally, she has to manage the project and the relationships with internal stakeholders. So she is communicating with her boss regularly about the objective and strategy of the project, any challenges that arise to getting it completed, and the ongoing status of the project. Other important stakeholders include sales, who are usually the beneficiaries of a campaign, particularly if it's, the goal is lead generation. So in our business, this includes people like executive directors who run the communities and lead leasing sales agents. Additionally, the marketing manager will communicate what is happening with marketing at each of the communities with operations, who manage the overall performance of the communities. Understanding the role of development, these are the people who actually build the buildings and design them in a specific way so that various care can happen within our various communities. So understanding what they do and how they do it is a really key piece of the product offering. Executive management, who manage the overall performance of the company, are usually communicated with the VP of marketing, but plenty of instances occur where the marketing manager actually interfaces with executive management, who then also hold the relationship with investors. And then there are the investors themselves. Every so often, the marketing manager actually has to interface directly with the investors. Now, you may have noticed that I didn't say the one relationship in which marketing is supremely focused, the customer relationship. This relationship is sort of the invisible relationship to us because we're always thinking about the prospect or customer that we're trying to reach, the human being, the messaging, the calls to action, the value proposition we're conveying. But technically, at least in our business, sales really holds that relationship. And so we gain a lot of insights about consumers through sales. So again, that relationship with sales is really critical. Ongoing lead generation efforts comprise a variety of tactics through numerous channels. So in our business, we target seniors, but we also target the adult children of seniors. So there are several channels through which we communicate: digital, traditional, like TV, radio, and print, direct mail, events. We use HubSpot in our CRM quite a bit. And then we also do a lot of reporting, which I'll talk about separately. But just saying digital, for those of you who are really familiar with digital, it doesn't do it near enough justice because there are so many aspects to digital and it's so complicated. Email, paid search, paid social, display ads, SEO, social media, websites, landing pages, content. That's just a few of them. I mean, there are so many aspects to it. So having accounted for all the channels through which we market, let's look at some pieces of ongoing lead generation effort, specifically paid digital, organic search, email, and direct mail. And what I mean by looking at the pieces, I'm not going to show you the actual creative deliverables, but I want to show you the process, how we get there, and how important project management and relationship management are to that. At Allegro, getting prospects into the community is really important so they can interact with the team, meet the staff, tour the community, meet other residents. So tours and events are a primary driver of new qualified leads, but it takes a lot of promotion and effort to get there. So if we look at a flow chart detailing event promotion, it would look something like this from the marketing manager's perspective. So hopefully you guys can see this okay. It's a little bit busy, but I'll break it down for you real quick. So the marketing manager initially meets with sales to determine the event theme and specifics like data and criteria for a direct mail list. And once we kind of know that, then she contacts the list broker to get a list for the direct mail piece. So how many people are on that list? Then we also use that as a quote to actually get the direct mail pieces designed. And then we also look at that in terms of the budget. Then we develop a creative brief for agencies and internal stakeholders so that everybody's on the same page. Develop a timeline with identified deliverables. So email, website, landing pages, social media, etc. And at this point, we're making sure that everything falls within budget. And this is the marketing manager's responsibility. Then she confers with agencies on messaging, creative, CTA, timelines, and really goes over the creative brief with them. Then internally, she'll meet with people in-house who help put together things in HubSpot, the CRM. Then the creative from the agency comes back. It's shared with the stakeholders, so sales or the community in question. They provide feedback. Those changes are then communicated back to the agency where revisions are made. Then they're sent back to the stakeholders. So after all of that, the final deliverables are routed to various agencies and internal resources. So the digital agency might receive, paid social ads or paid display ads. If they're helping us with a landing page or a website, they might be given creative for that. The traditional media agency, TV, radio, and print, they'll receive creative and get those out to, the publications or the media outlets. And then finally, the internal resources also receive resources for HubSpot emails, landing pages, etc. So as you can see, it's a lot. The other thing that I did mention, which I alluded to earlier, was reporting and communications is another huge responsibility of marketing management. So on an ongoing basis, the marketing manager is keeping an eye on the results through various dashboard reporting tools, notifications from HubSpot if a lead has come in, and we're constantly monitoring leads and lead generation efforts basically in real time. But the reporting of that is really important, which goes back out to the internal stakeholders. So it's a lot to manage, but to make sure that it's done on time and within budget is not only a challenge, but it's pretty amazing how often it happens. And that's certainly attributable to project management skills. There's one unspoken truth as it relates to project management that virtually no students, in my opinion, can possibly think of managing because they haven't encountered it yet, which is ambiguity. So this is a sign that was given to me by some students who had me for multiple classes, where I reinforced the ambiguity message so much that they wanted to let me know that it actually sunk in. So your students can have the best boss or mentor, have mad hard skills, but I have yet to meet one student who has experience in managing ambiguity. And oftentimes, regardless of strategy and plans, a significant amount of marketing, regardless of how much info is on the web, on socials, and in books, is ambiguous. Marketing doesn't come with an instruction manual. And typically, our students will not have someone teaching and showing them exactly what to do in any given situation. Being able to manage ambiguity in the unknown is really important, especially as it relates to project management. So with that, I want to switch gears and talk about relationship management, which is certainly related to project management. So what I'd love to know from all of you, if you wouldn't mind using your chat function once again, is do you cover relationship management at all in your classes? And if you don't, do you see possibilities where you might be able to introduce that subject or topic? So do you cover relationship management at all in your courses?
So Terry, it looks like people do cover relationship management.
Great.
So far, everything has been a yes with that.
Okay, fantastic. I'm thrilled to hear that. Thrilled to hear it. Okay, well, good. Well, let's talk about it anyway, because I think there are a few things that I might be able to share with you, and hopefully you guys will also share your tips with me. But what I have certainly seen, from all my time in the business world and in the classroom is it's really apparent, how much interaction goes on between marketing and in this case, a marketing manager and their respective constituencies in terms of internal and external stakeholders. So, stressing to students how important managing relationships is such an essential task in marketing. And as we alluded to earlier, there's so many relationships potentially in, large companies, but even small companies. And so I think probably the most important relationship, though, for them to manage is the one with themselves. So it's interesting because we often worry about what others think of us. We want to be liked, we want to fit in, we want to do a good job, especially for those who are just starting out. But sometimes we don't see our own place in the overall picture. So I talk to my students about Sun Tzu quite a bit, an ancient Chinese warrior and philosopher who wrote the timeless strategy treatise, The Art of War. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. And many takeaways from this book, but the one that I want to talk about here is, in battles, armies and warriors are focused on the enemy, right? What are the enemy strategies? What are their skills? What are their, advantages that they're bringing? But what Sun Tzu said is like, look, you got to know yourself just as well as you know your enemy. And if you do that, you're going to fare well in all your battles, because it's not always just about your adversary. It's very much about you and how you handle things, whatever those might be. And so, hopefully students, future bosses, coworkers, and stakeholders are not their enemies, right? But the point is that knowing oneself is really important, and all relationship management begins with oneself. Our default is to think of the other person's part in our relationship with them, but what is our part in the relationship? And I have found this to be very useful in talking to students about this. So the only things that we can control in this life that I have found are how we react to things. So our students need to be proactive about their reactions, proactive about being reactive. Their thoughts, words, and actions are things they can control, which typically translate to how others view them, treat them, whether they want to work with them, and ultimately how our students progress throughout their career. So I've created a list of 8 relationship management truisms that I've learned over the course of my career and throughout the courses I teach. And I attempt to instill these into my students, and I would just love to share them with you right now. So the first one is an acronym that I affectionately have come to call JAF, or JAF, and it stands for the jackass factor. And the reason I introduce this to my students is to not be funny or crass, although they actually get a kick out of it, pun intended, sorry, but to underscore the fact that marketing management, and especially relationship management, doesn't have room for jackasses. No matter how good their skills are, how well they can strategize, execute, or project manage, if they're difficult, cocky, arrogant, and can't get along with people, nobody will want them on their team. Number 2, managing up. I learned a long time ago that while people managed me, I could also manage them, in this case, my bosses, something that is referred to as managing up. I used to think I was doing my bosses a favor by handling things so well that I wouldn't have to bother them with what I was doing, or they wouldn't have to concern themselves with what I was working on. I was handling it. Well, I found out this was a big mistake. If you're not reminding people of all the things that you're working on, they may think you don't have much to do. They may simply wonder what you're doing, or they may not understand the complexity or the amount of work you're doing. One of my former bosses used to like to say, you never want your boss to wonder what you're doing. And just recently, as a matter of fact, I gave my boss an abbreviated update of everything that I was working on, and I do this proactively. And he responded, I'm always amazed at how much is going on. So if I hadn't reached out to him proactively, he wouldn't know. And that's the whole point. Number 3, empathy. We've heard a lot about empathy in recent years. Thank goodness. Empathy comes natural to most, but not everyone. And I like to remind students, particularly during group projects, that it's important to understand others' perspectives, especially people with whom you work both inside and outside the company. Empathy is kind of like ESP in that reading people, sensing where they are and how they hold things can be a great advantage in not only connecting with people, but getting your job done along with the results that you're trying to achieve. And even though our students will be newbies when they first get out there, it's never too soon to think of others and how things look and feel from others' perspectives. Number 4, soft skills. So empathy is certainly a soft skill, but we've seen a profound emphasis on the soft skills in the last few years, and it's about time. Emotional intelligence, communication skills, creativity, among many others, are essential in forging and managing relationships. We need to teach our students hard skills, no doubt, but we need to help them understand the importance of soft skills and do our best to implement and reinforce through classwork and assignments. As an aside, to kind of demonstrate how much things have changed, when I was working on my thesis in 2006, I was getting a master's in international business. My thesis was on using empathy as a framework for entering emerging global markets. And I was actually discouraged from using this topic because it didn't focus enough on hard skills. How things have changed, thank goodness. Number 5, win-win. So in a lot of cases in business and in life, there is an inherent competition to everything we do. But fortunately, it is not a zero-sum game where one side wins and one side loses. I advise students that they want to get on a winning team where their bosses, mentors, and coworkers want them to win. Similarly, as marketing professionals who work with agencies, vendors, and freelancers, we need them to win on our projects too. Win-wins lift everybody up. Number 6, do the right thing. This is certainly related to the win-win topic. But years ago, as an example, I had a valued web developer who grossly underestimated the project that she was working on. As it continued to evolve, we added more and more functionality, affectionately known as scope creep. And the developer was prepared to eat a loss of about $8,000, which would have been a nice savings for us. But I assured her she was getting paid because she deserved it. I also wanted to keep her in the game to finish the project to completion. But most importantly, it was simply the right thing to do. Number 7, know your worth. For students just starting out in the world of business and marketing, most are just hoping to get their first shot. And as they settle in and are earnest to do their best, learn and move up, there's a natural inclination to sort of do anything or everything to get ahead. In this job climate, we've heard a lot about how employees are sort of in the driver's seat when it comes to their jobs. I'm not sure how much that's going to hold, but new employees need to know their worth and stand firm in the conviction that they should never be someone's doormat. Everyone deserves respect, but sometimes you don't get it even if you've earned it. And often the best way to get it is to treat others with respect and hold themselves like someone who should be valued. I had a boss years ago who was really, really smart and gave me an amazing opportunity. Unfortunately, I learned quickly that he was very much a bully. And at the time, I was really resistant to confrontation. But what I learned was by pushing back honestly, rationally, and unemotionally, I was able to stay in a job that I was otherwise ready to quit. So new employees deserve respect, but sometimes you have to push back. And sometimes you have to even be willing to walk. So number 8, this is a great one to wrap up with, in my opinion. The boss is more important than the company. We often hear from students, or at least I do, that they want to work for X company. They see the big name, they see the logo, whatever it might be. And I think this one really strikes at the heart of relationship management. Tell your students to look for a great boss, not just a great company. If they can forge a great working relationship with a boss who wants to coach and mentor, that will come back to them in spades as they progress throughout their career. Great bosses value relationships, and realize that lifting people up only helps them as well as those who they are helping. Ultimately, our students will be bosses too, and then we've kind of fostered a new way of managing and thinking, which will have impact for years and years to come. So my final thought is that I just, would love to applaud all of you for taking on the awesome challenge and opportunity and responsibility for educating students today for the business world tomorrow. We all need to remember, though, what it's like to be facing the job market upon graduation. It's a tremendous dichotomy because on the one hand, a student feels smart, accomplished, and they have a great sense of achievement. On the other hand, they're usually terrified, have no idea what to expect, and for the most part, realizing that they're entering uncharted territory alone is very daunting. So I truly believe that any marketing or business admin student will greatly benefit by understanding how important project management and relationship management are in their marketing jobs and really for any job. So with that, I will like to thank you all very much for your time and consideration. Open it up for some Q&A, which you can submit using the chat function.
Great,
Paul?
thank you, Terry. Yes, that was awesome. Really enjoyed it. We do have some questions that have come in, and I'm just going to read those to you.
Okay.
First, Betsy has asked, what kind of tools or tips do you use to teach project management?
Great question. I thought this might come up. For me, I have not found in the courses that I teach a lot on project management or relationship management. So having, been out there for a long time, I have all kinds of examples that I draw from. I have a couple of lesson plans on project management and relationship management, and I try to work those in. So if I'm teaching, intro to Marcom or a marketing class, digital marketing, it might not really be part of the syllabus, but I'll figure a way to work it in because it's just one of those things that we have so much to teach, right? Especially as it relates to the syllabus and all the things that are, learning objectives for the course. But this is really important. So that's sort of how I handle it. And I had mentioned to Paul, I have some lesson plans that I would be happy to share with you. Paul, I hope that's okay.
Yeah, great.
And if any of you want to reach out, my email is down below. That's my consulting company. You can reach me on LinkedIn, but just, hit me up and I'd be happy to share some of the resources that I use with you.
Thanks, Terry. Stacy is asking, in a comprehensive digital marketing degree program, would you recommend discussing project and relationship management as part of the first introductory course or a DM strategy capstone course? Seems foundational and helpful to know in advance, but maybe better at the end to apply those skills they have acquired through the program.
Man, that is a great question. I mean, personally, I think it should be part of the foundational course, but I would also, do your best to weave it throughout, and then perhaps in a final or capstone type scenario, really emphasize through assignments or coursework, project management and relationship management. A lot of folks, at least in my perspective, don't really realize, how much project management is involved. So when they're introduced to a course, if we're just going over, all the things that are on our syllabus and we're not talking about project management, they may be like, oh my gosh, I'm a great project manager. I'm a very organized person. I can hold things together. I can manage timelines, etc. So I had a conversation with a coworker at Allegro, and she started as a coordinator, but she had no idea how much project management would be, a part of her job. And she said, had I known that earlier, I would have been much more motivated to pursue marketing and communications, because I just thought it was really sort of everything but project management and relationship management. And she has absolutely flourished because she has some of those skills innately, but she's also worked at honing them. So sorry, that was a very long answer to your question, but I hope that helps, Stacy.
Thanks, Terry. Another question is, what are some of the tips you share with your students to help them manage ambiguity and the unknown?
Man, the ambiguity thing is so near and dear to my heart, because every time that I've introduced it to a class, and if any of you have heard me speak at a previous Stu Kent, seminar, I talk about ambiguity all the time. It's really become a staple. And so I will ask the students, and this even goes into, intro courses. How many of you are familiar with managing ambiguity? Raise your hand. Nobody raises their hand. And I said, how many of you know what ambiguity is? Most people don't. Matter of fact, very few have ever raised their hands, because ambiguity isn't a word you hear very often, right? Things are so ambiguous. And it just as a personal story, so I went back to corporate America starting in January. And it was, I have a lot of experience, and it was so ambiguous to me. So I had to go sort of be thrown into the deep end without really any onboarding, anything at all. And so managing that ambiguity is obviously something that I've acquired over the years. But when students know that it's coming, it helps them immensely. So the class that gave me that sign in particular, this one student, she said, I can't believe how true the ambiguity thing turned out to be, because the minute I graduated, looking for a job, major ambiguity, all these processes and things that they're going to experience that there's not a playbook for. So it sort of diffuses their anxiety and helps them with expectation management. So I would just say, like for instance, when I give assignments, particularly group projects, a lot of times I've been, sort of accused of not giving them enough direction. And I hate to say it, but I mean, it's on purpose, because a lot of times they're not going to get that kind of explicit direction. So they figure a lot of it out, and that's all part of, managing the ambiguity.
Thanks, Terry. We have about 1 minute left. We've got one question here from Caleb. Would you recommend students actually pursuing a PMP credential if they are going to be a marketing professional?
Man, that's a good question. I think project management, as we relate to it, versus project management as a Microsoft certified project manager, for instance. I'm thinking of an IT person that I know in particular. Her world of project management is probably more complex, but I think any kind of training or certification would always be a welcome addition. I would hate to overwhelm them from the standpoint of, pursuing that while they're getting their degree. I think it might be something that might be better pursued after they get out and they're kind of in their jobs. But I think it certainly could only benefit them.
All right. Well, thanks, Terry, for that.
Thank you.
This has been a wonderful session. That was a magnificent presentation. You can tell by the chatter in the chat box that people really enjoyed it. People were really engaged. So thank you for taking that time. Just for any of you out there,